In some remote villages, eyes that can see souls are known as een eyes. Animals such as chickens, cats, and dogs all possess such eyes, especially dogs. After sunset, they seem to see ghosts and can drive them out of homes, so villagers like to keep a dog both for protection against thieves and for its ghost-repelling qualities. However, some people also possess een eyes, especially nonverbal children who are more prone to seeing ghosts. Yet, as these children grow and start to speak, they no longer see these spirits, although a very few can see ghosts throughout their lives. There was a little girl in the village who had been frail since she was young. Due to the weak fire within her body, she was often suppressed by ghosts, and she also had een eyes, frequently seeing unclean things. One midnight, while she slept soundly, she was awakened by a cold breeze and saw a face on the wall smiling at her vaguely. She quickly turned on the light, but when the light was on, the face on the wall disappeared. When she turned off the light, the face reappeared. This repeated several times. She was so scared that she covered her head with a quilt and dared not move anymore. Another time, she was playing hide and seek with some friends in front of an old temple in the village. When it was her turn to seek, she approached a big locust tree and saw something dark sitting under it. Thinking it was a friend hiding, she shouted, "Don't move, I've found you now," and pointed a flashlight there, only to find nothing. As she turned to leave, she felt a cold breeze blow from behind. Feeling that something was behind her, she turned around and suddenly saw the dark shadow under the tree lunge towards her. She quickly shone the flashlight at the shadow, shouting, "Who's there?" but found the shadow had disappeared. After this scare, she lost the mood to continue playing and went home alone in the dark. Just as she reached the entrance of her home, she suddenly felt someone following her. Turning around, she saw a monster with the body of a human and the head of a dog about to pounce on her. She screamed and fell to the ground. Hearing her cries from outside, her mother quickly opened the door, saw her daughter sitting dumbly on the ground, and asked worriedly, "Child, what's wrong? Who bullied you? Tell Mom, and I'll find them." She was so frightened that she could only stutter, "Mom, ghost, ghost." Her mother looked around but saw nothing and realized her daughter must have been scared by something unclean, so she helped her into the house. That night, she started running a high fever and talking deliriously. Her mother took her to the hospital. In the hospital, she slept for 3 days, during which the doctors and her mother couldn't wake her. Finally, with no other solution, her mother thought of the village witch doctor, Granny Lou. After Granny Lou came and saw her peculiar condition, she declared she was possessed by a monster with the body of a human and the head of a dog. After reciting scriptures and exorcising the evil, the girl woke up. As she grew up, she became stronger, and her een eyes became like those of ordinary people, no longer able to see ghosts. In a neighboring village, there was a little girl who also had een eyes. When she was unable to speak, her mother took her to visit relatives. As they passed by a cemetery, she started crying and fussing, unwilling for her mother to pass through there. Her mother thought she was hungry and tried to feed her, but she could not be calmed. With no other choice, her mother had to take another route, and only then did she stop crying and quiet down. After they arrived at the relative's house, they soon heard that there had been a car accident on the road passing through the cemetery. A young man driving a truck suddenly lost control of his limbs and drove directly into people on the roadside, killing 5 or 6 people before crashing into a large tree and coming to a stop. When asked by the police why he hit the people, he said that upon reaching that place, he saw a headless woman in white floating towards his truck, pushing him aside, and then the woman in white drove the truck into the people. People did not believe his story, thinking he made up the lie to evade responsibility. Later, a person knowledgeable in exorcism explained that the young truck driver was not lying. It was the ghost of the headless woman in white from the cemetery looking for a substitute, who came onto his truck and drove it into people. The little girl, having een eyes, was able to see the headless woman in white ghost and was scared into crying, preventing her mother from going that way, thus saving themselves from disaster. Previously, there was a boy in the town who was tall and skinny, and often sick, needing to visit the hospital. He too had keen eyes and could see things others could not. Once, as it was getting dark, his grandmother accompanied him to the town's hospital for a checkup. After arriving, the doctor asked him and his grandmother to wait in the wards. They entered an empty ward, and as his grandmother was an impatient person, they did not wait long before she decided to leave him alone in the room while she went to look for the doctor. While waiting for his grandmother to return with the doctor, he suddenly saw a little boy about his age in white clothes crawling out from under a hospital bed, standing in front of him and smiling eerily. Being young and naive, thinking the boy in white was also there for treatment, he tried to greet him. At that moment, the ward door creaked open, and his grandmother returned with a young doctor to see him. Just then, he saw the boy in white raise his fist to hit the doctor, and he anxiously shouted to the doctor, "Uncle, watch out, a boy is going to hit you." The young doctor, hearing his warning, quickly turned around to scan the room, seeing no other child besides him. Puzzled, he asked, "Child, where is the boy you're talking about? I can't see anyone." At this moment, he still saw the boy in white behind the young doctor, raising his fist to hit him, and shouted anxiously, "Uncle, move away. There really is a boy right behind you, trying to hit you." The young doctor turned around again and saw no one behind him, thinking he was lying, angrily scolded him, "Child, stop lying, or uncle will have to give you a shot in your buttock." His grandmother also scolded him, saying, "Child, your teacher always teaches you to be honest. Why are you lying again today?" Seeing that the young doctor and his grandmother did not believe him, and yet the boy in white still trailed behind the young doctor, he desperately shook his head and said, "Grandma, uncle, I'm not lying, there really is a boy following right behind uncle." The young doctor, seeing that he did not appear to be lying, asked him curiously what the boy looked like. He described the boy in white clothes he had seen to the young doctor, who, upon hearing this, turned pale with terror, shivering uncontrollably, and screamed, "Child, I didn't do it on purpose, it was just an accident with the wrong injection." With that, the young doctor turned and fled from the ward in desperation. At this, he saw the boy in white duck back under the bed and vanish. He and his grandmother, sensing something strange about the ward, didn't dare stay any longer and hurriedly followed the young doctor out. Later, he heard from others that there once was a boy in white clothes who came to the hospital for treatment. The boy was seriously ill and needed enthralled. It so happened that it was the young doctor who prepared the medication. That day, the young doctor's girlfriend had broken up with him, leaving him in a very bad mood. He carelessly mixed the wrong medication for the boy, leading to the boy in white dying in his hospital bed. After this incident, the traumatized young doctor left the hospital. Since then, each time dusk fell, the boy, who kept returning to the hospital for treatment, would see the ghost of the boy in white wandering in front of the ward where he had died. He knew that the boy in white must still have been looking for the young doctor who had caused his death to seek revenge. Later on, he heard that the young doctor had died unexpectedly with a look of terror on his face, as though he had seen something unclean. He knew the ghost of the boy in white had had his revenge, and after that, he never saw the ghost again. Years passed, and he grew up, became educated, and ended up as a doctor at the same hospital. Whenever he remembered this terrible event, he would focus intently on prescribing medications for each patient, never making a mistake again. In this way, he became a well-known doctor in the local area. According to folklore, there are methods to open one's keen eyes. 1. Swallowing the eyes of a crow alive, which will bring lifelong utility. This method involves killing a living being and can potentially bring ghosts upon oneself, so everyone is advised not to try it. 2. Digging a small water pit in open ground and placing a piece of glass over it to peer into, until the last ray of light at dusk ends. It is said that one can see the sights of hell through this. Whether you believe it or not, feel free to try. It is claimed that, successful or not, ghosts will not harm your body. 3. On rainy days, take a piece of wet mud and place it on your head, hiding in the corner of a wall and spying on places where accidents frequently happen. This method is no longer effective because the exact timing of its use is unknown, so be cautious in attempting it. For collecting dew in the early morning, mixing it with willow leaves and branches, and sealing it in a way that it doesn't get exposed to light for 3 days. Afterwards, applying it to one's eyes is said to enable seeing ghosts for a period of time. Note, the rainwater should not be heated and must not contain any impurities. Martha usually lived alone, only looking forward to reuniting with her family during Christmas. In reality, the reunion only involved her and her son. Her husband had died early, leaving her alone, and now she relied on the money and a few daily necessities her son sent every month to get by. Martha spoke very little, becoming even less willing to interact with others after her spouse's death. However, Martha wasn't entirely alone. Observant villagers often heard her talking over the wall. Initially, everyone thought she was talking to her son and didn't pay much attention. But over time, it became peculiar since her son was working abroad and hardly returned once a year. It was impossible for him to be there then. It was quite a mystery. Now it was summer, and people had nothing to do in the evenings but enjoy the cool air and talk about other people's misfortunes or fortunes. In fact, only the elderly, lazy, or foolish ones remained in the village. Everyone else had moved away. Only about a dozen people were left in the village. The village was surrounded by walls on all 4 sides, a relic from the medieval English period, robust and stable. Despite centuries of conflicts that had left them damaged, pieces of history blasted open but never repaired, they still stood proudly, withstanding the test of time. Decades of weathering adorned the barriers with moss and ivy climbing up the stone walls, making them look like misty guards in green. There were 4 gates on the wall, remnants of an era when defenses were paramount, and they still existed. The village hardly saw any strangers, they dared not enter as once inside. If something got lost, it was hard to explain. Besides, there wasn't much of value to steal, and it wasn't worth being falsely accused. Consequently, due to a lack of news, the village's buzz these days became about whom Martha was talking to. So, a few people banded together in the evening to listen. They only heard Martha saying, "Eat quickly, and then sleep early. The sun won't come back, it's only you with me." Listening to this, some old men concluded that Martha must have hidden someone. They thought it over. There weren't many people in the village, only the bachelor Steve and Walter from the West End were capable, but both were impossible as they had alibis of being at a tavern. They surely thought it must be someone from outside the village. The more the old men thought about it, the stranger it seemed that Martha, who appeared so decent, could be involved in such a thing. Consequently, rumors spread, and people stopped talking to Martha, making her even more isolated. Martha resorted to counting the days, with people listening by her wall in the evening when it got cooler. Those days she spoke more, saying, "I don't know why these days no one talks to me, even Helen avoids me as if she's seen a ghost. They won't talk to me, and I have no idea why. When her spouse was alive, we often helped them out. It's true what they say about not truly knowing others. Now, I don't even know why they've stopped talking to me. Are you listening? If you're listening, just nod." "Ah, right, you nodded. You're listening. It's getting late, let's sleep. Your eyes are drooping. I'm tired too, let's sleep," leaving those listening outside feeling unsatisfied. Helen mentioned in the discussion was a lady in her 70s from the village. Everyone was speculating, who could it be? Which villager sneaked into Martha's house every night only to leave undetected the next morning? They split up, with some secretly keeping watch at the village entrance for days, others hidden near Martha's front door. One evening, an old man at the village entrance was on lookout when someone approached. It was Steve, who also eavesdropped on Martha. Steve said, "Come out, it started." Smith responded, "What, I didn't see anyone enter the village." The group then gathered behind Martha's wall to listen, picking up mid-conversation. It seemed like there was a subject matter. Martha was saying, after the eldest son graduated and started working, he even brought the eldest to the city. The second one's family has now gone south to work with their son. The third went to the city for business, leaving just me, and my son works in the city. It's just me at home now. Hearing this, Smith couldn't listen any longer and commented, "She's just talking about family matters, and we didn't hear anything about that." "You know what I mean." Steve retorted, "Where's your mind going?" "I'm saying, who exactly is Martha hiding in her house? They haven't gone home for several days, have they?" Smith suggested, "Let's discuss it tomorrow. Look at the time, I'm off to sleep." So, everyone headed home. Martha lived a solitary life, only reuniting with her family during Christmas. The reunion was just between her and her son since her husband had passed away early, leaving her by herself. Now, she sustained her life with the money and some essentials sent by her son each month. Martha barely spoke and grew even less willing to interact with others after her partner's death. However, Martha wasn't truly alone. Observant villagers often heard her speaking to someone over the wall. Initially, everyone thought she was talking to her son, but with time, this seemed unlikely as her son worked abroad and hardly returned once a year. It was quite the mystery. As summer arrived, people with little to do enjoyed discussing others' misfortunes or fortunes in the cool of the evening breeze. In fact, only the elderly, the idle, or the foolish remained in the village. Everyone else had moved away. Only about a dozen people stayed in the village. The village was encompassed by walls, a legacy of fortified architecture from medieval England, strong and stable. Centuries of conflicts had damaged them, blasted open pieces of history had not been repaired, but they still stood solemnly, passing the test of time. Weathering over decades had adorned the barriers with moss and vines climbing over the stone walls, making them look like mist-cloaked sentinels. For gates remained in the wall, vestiges of an era that prioritized defense. The village saw hardly any strangers. Outsiders didn't dare to enter, fearing blame if something were to go missing. Besides, with few valuable possessions, it wasn't worth being falsely accused. Thus, the small village suffered from a lack of news until the recent talks circled around who exactly Martha was speaking with. So, a few people gathered at night near her wall to listen, only to hear Martha saying, "Eat up and sleep early. The sun won't come back, you're the only one with me." The conversations left the eavesdroppers longing for more, with the elder Helen being one of the people mentioned. Everyone speculated who it could be, and which villager was sneaking into Martha's house at night and leaving unnoticed the next morning. They divided tasks, with some keeping watch at the village entrance and others hiding near Martha's doorway. One evening, as the old men kept watch, Steve arrived, saying, "Come out, it started." Smith replied, "What? I didn't see anyone." The men gathered behind Martha's wall to overhear, but the conversation had shifted. It was hard to follow, but this time there was a subject matter, with Martha stating, the eldest son graduated and recently moved with his father to the city. The second family went to work down south with their son. The third family went off to the city to run a business, leaving just me here. My son works in the city. It's just me at home now. Smith abruptly ended his eavesdropping, saying, "You see, she's just going on about family. Didn't hear anything, you know." Steve countered, "Where's your mind wandering?" "I'm saying, who exactly is Martha hiding in her house? They haven't gone home for days, have they?" Smith suggested, "Let's talk tomorrow. Look at the time, I'm off to sleep." Everyone dispersed and headed home. The next day, Steve said with determination, "Such an incident must never happen in our village. There aren't many of us left, but we must maintain our innocence and can't let old lady who ruined the village's reputation." His words indeed resonated with everyone's thoughts. But what could they do? Martha was cunning in hiding someone profoundly, and she rarely left her house during daylight. Smith came up with a good idea, which they all executed. Among the old men, only Smith was still accompanied by his wife, so he was the first to knock on Martha's door. After a long knocking session, when Martha finally opened a crack to see it was Smith and tried to close the door, all the men made their presence known. Smith announced, "A weasel has sneaked over the wall into your house, we need to search for it." Steve added, "It just killed one of my chickens, a dangerous one." Martin, another elder, chimed in, "To prevent it from harming more chickens, we need to find it." Martha, reluctantly overwhelmed by the situation, allowed them to come in for a search. The old men searched the place, cautiously avoiding any breakage. They entered all accessible rooms and asked Martha to unlock any locked ones. They checked everywhere, even the cellar. The only peculiar scene was the roosters on the living room floor, unusually kept inside cages that were particularly clean. Although it was strange, no one dwelled on it. Martha asked if they found the weasel, to which Steve replied, "Not yet, there must be other places, tell us quickly, it could be a danger to all the chickens in the village, maybe even people." Martha urged them, "Then keep looking, you've seen all my rooms. Please help me find it, it can't be hiding in my house." Steve suggested it might already have run off, to which the old men laughed knowingly. After they left, confirming every nook had been searched, and no stone left unturned, the men planned to keep watch around Martha's yard. If no one came and Martha still spoke, it couldn't be a person. Could it be a ghost? Though the old men had plenty of life experience, the idea sent chills down their spines. Yet they had to come to a conclusion, they had already come this far, otherwise, their recent endeavors would go wasted. Steve persistently watched Martha's yard, his eyes wide open, fearing he might encounter a legendary martial artist from the rumors who would leap and climb over Martha's wall. But there was nothing, certainly nothing. He trusted his own eyes until he heard Smith say, "Did you spot anyone?" Martha's voice is carrying again. That's when Steve blinked in disbelief. No one, absolutely no one went in. Martin was a bit skeptical, "That's odd. Could it be Martha's person has returned?" Steve pondered, "The ghost has come back." Martin somberly asserted, "Isn't it obvious?" The old men went back, locking their doors. None of them slept well, and from that moment on, no one dared to come near Martha's house. As Christmas neared, with the climate turning frigid, Martha's son returned. To his surprise, people avoided him, leaving him to wonder what was going on. Upon entering his home, he found his mother Martha swinging from the house beam, with a dead rooster nearby. Martha was still in her summer clothes, signaling she had been dead for quite a while, with no one having entered the house since. The house was as cold as the outside, and Martha's body had frozen solid. People returning home for Christmas heard crying from Martha's house, but no one truly understood what had occurred.